So our philosophy is very simple.
Mm.
First, you look at the idea. Is it really solving a problem? Yes or a no? Yes, then you go down. Then you see team. Is there enough conviction in the team that we'll be able to do it and we'll be able to make a progress on it? If that's a yes, you go back, you go a little down. No, then you keep rejecting.
Mm.
Then after that, you see, is there economics or viability to the idea? Because eventually it has to be a profitable thing. Come whatsoever, ultimately everything has to turn down. Then after that, you see if it's a B2B or a B2C play. B2C is kind of a little no-no for me because it's difficult raising funds unless it's a B2B2C. You're selling it to someone which then sells it to the consumer. Then it's yes. And then you see what is the market size available.
Mm.
So unless there is a market size, you cannot, decide to invest.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a vodcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you are new to our channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm in conversation with a very, very accomplished entrepreneur from Jaipur, India, Vivek Lodha. Vivek, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Vivek is the director of JVS Foods Pvt. Limited. He's an angel investor and he's a public speaker. So Vivek, let's talk about JVS Foods first. Tell me about this venture.
So JVS Foods is a food processing unit. We've been serving millions of undernourished children and women across the globe.
Mhm.
Basically, we make institutional food, which is only supplied to agencies like state government, national government, developing nations, UNICEF, World Food Program. Through all these organizations, we supply low cost nutrition food, which eventually goes to the underprivileged kids of the world. So we've been doing this for a very, very long time, and we've been in touch with most of these world-class organizations, and they constantly tell us to develop products and go about further expansion. So after doing this, I think in 2015, we started doing more and more R&D with R&D product with new products,
Mhm.
and then we came up with a supplement for salt, which is an iron supplement added to salt because anemia is a major problem in our country.
Mm.
And then after that, we got fortified rice kernel, which are rice kernels added to the rice, which gives you iron, folic acid, and B12. So they're on so on and so forth. We've been constantly trying to evolve, and R&D is what keeps us upbeat.
Amazing. And how many meals would you be supplying daily, monthly, or any numbers?
So just to give you, when we were doing Rajasthan, we were doing 10 lakh meals a day. And then at some point in time, we were doing 3 states, which would probably be around 35 to 40 lakh meals a day. So the number varies because it's a tender-driven process, but qualification is essentially if you have to be approved by world-class agencies. So that's only how you will be able to do
Wow.
it.
And just a follow-up question to that. I mean, every state would have its own cuisine requirements. How do you manage that?
So you're absolutely right, and every state has its own palate. But essentially, this food is going free of cost to the lowest strata of the society,
Hmm.
where they have bare minimal food. And especially when a child is born, from a 6-month-old child to a 3-year-old child, this is like a low-cost Cerelac, if you had to say.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter what their palatability is.
Hmm.
All those state governments kind of design the recipe as per the requirement of their state, but essentially what they really like is sugar in the meal so that it's more palatable,
Hmm.
and it's for the women of the society which are undergoing pregnancy or lactation period. So this is more like a medicinal meal. At the same time, it's tasty. So yeah.
Very interesting. So Vivek, when I was looking at your website, you showed two food ranges. One is institutional and the other is commercial. What is the difference? Institutional, I'm assuming, is what you supply to states.
So So website could be deceptive.
Mhm.
We are a complete B2B player.
Okay.
Institutional food is going to all these state governments, UNICEF, and all these NGOs of the world. And then commercial range is essentially we make product which private sector kind of sells it under their brand. So we are giving products to ITC and Nestle and but they're not directly consumed. They would either mix it with some of their products or they want us to do R&D for their product. We make a product, we design a product for them, and then they decide if they want production with us or they want just want the product ready and they can take it to wherever they find it as more feasible. Yeah.
Very interesting. And you mentioned that you're working across the country. Are you working globally also?
So right now we are working across the country only.
Mhm.
We have worked across the globe, mostly in African continent.
Mhm.
These are underdeveloping or developing nations like Sudan, Egypt, and all these African nations. I think 18 countries in Africa we've supplied, but
Mhm.
fortunately we've also supplied to Europe at some point in time where people really liked our product and they directly called for from our company.
Okay.
So yeah, but
Fascinating.
mostly
Fascinating.
yeah.
And what are some of the challenges that you face, when you are supplying across the whole country?
So when you're supplying across the country,
Mhm.
first challenge is the cultural issue, then there are language issues,
Mhm.
then are logistics, supply chain, government policy, to name a lot of them. But fortunately, we've been lucky because we've got support of the people there. And also, like you had actually earlier mentioned, the palatability and
Mhm.
taste,
Mhm.
we kind of customize as per their requirement because sometimes from the field there is a complaint stating that ki sir mithai kam hai.
Mhm.
So even if the recipe doesn't say you have to have a high degree of sugar, we add a little bit of sugar extra
Mhm.
and ask them to eat a little bigger serving size so that they like it more and they're able to consume the meal.
Mhm.
And also all these language issues when the supply is made. India is a world in itself. So
Correct.
if it's going to South India, the language issues, what they are trying to communicate and what we are trying to understand
Mhm.
sometimes varies. English is not easily acceptable in the rural part, and in the urban part, Hindi is not acceptable. So, but more often than not, there are a lot of support that we've got from people. So,
Mhm.
fortunately, there hasn't been many big challenges.
Fantastic. And if you look at what has happened because of the pandemic in the last 18, 20 months, how has that impacted your supply chain distribution or your business?
So, last year, when the pandemic happened, it was very dicey in terms of industries would work,
Mm.
not work, essentials. Then we did not come directly under essentials, because we were supplying to government.
Mm.
So what happened? We couldn't operate because the labor went. Labor issues were there, so we couldn't operate. But compared to last year and this year,
Mm.
the industries are working. It's much easier. We've been able to operate and we've been able to operate very smoothly. Actually, the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise. We've been able to realize that there are a lot of people without whom we can work. And during the normal days, so-called normal days, these people used to complain that we are short-staffed, we have less people, and now a lot of people are working from home,
Mm.
and we've been able to manage our office with one or two people. So it's been blessing in disguise. People have realized we can do things even if we come once a week to the office or twice a
Mm.
week to the office. So fortunately, we've been able to got a lot of alignment in our organization. And last year there were problems, supply chain also, logistics also. But this year it's been just a
Sailing.
cakewalk for us to say,
Very
yeah.
nice. Very nice. So I'm going to now move to the next segment of our conversation. In your avatar as an angel investor, uh, tell me, what do you look for before you decide to make an investment?
So before I make an investment, I've probably made 50 plus investments now. So you have to have that philosophy around the investment that you're doing.
Mhm.
So that first two, three investments got me thinking, and then I designed a philosophy. So our philosophy is very simple.
Mm.
First, you look at the idea. Is it really solving a problem? Yes or a no? Yes, then you go down. Then you see team. is there enough conviction in the team that we'll be able to do it and we'll be able to make a progress on it? If that's a yes, you go back, you go a little down. No, then you keep rejecting.
Mm.
Then after that, you see, is there economics or viability to the idea? Because eventually it has to be a profitable thing. Come whatsoever, ultimately everything has to turn down. Then after that, you see if it's a B2B or a B2C play. B2C is kind of a little no-no for me because it's difficult raising funds unless it's a B2B2C. You're selling it to someone which then sells it to the consumer. Then it's yes. And then you see what is the market size available.
Mm.
So unless there is a market size, you cannot decide to invest. And after that, eventually, what is the exit plan? Every investor would ultimately look at what is the exit I'm going to get.
Mm.
So if the flow chart is kind of viable and everything is in place, I'm happy to go and invest. And I've got this philosophy written as an article on my LinkedIn, and I keep posting things on LinkedIn, because so that it's easier for the startup to approach me, and also they know my philosophy, so they exactly know what I'm looking for. So yeah, if people are interested, they can check my LinkedIn, and I've got things posted out
Wonderful.
there.
Wonderful. And you just mentioned that you've invested in over 50 startups.
Yeah.
So, a question that I have for you is that what are some of the key challenges you face with startup founders?
So with startup founders, the key challenges are basically, if you have to say, these are very because. So I'll come from the starting. As an angel investor,
Mm.
there are only three Fs who would invest in you, and that's not my statement. That's a friend of mine who's got a decent exit from IIT.
Mhm.
He's made this statement: three Fs: family, friends, and fools.
Mm.
So most of them, neither I'm family, neither I'm friends. So you're out to be a fool out there. So however smart you are, if you have a documented framework, it's fine. If you don't, then you're actually, it's a fool's
Mm.
play.
Mm.
So when I'm investing with these startups,
Mm.
I essentially look for their future
Mhm.
and the challenges that I face with them. They have a great idea, great passion, and everything is sorted out,
Mm.
but they don't understand how the real world functions.
Mm.
They think, this is out of box idea, and which I also believe is a great idea. That's how you decide. But they don't understand there are government norms, there are compliances, there are things that you have to ensure that you have to follow.
Mm.
So key role I take is as a mentor to ensure that all these problems are sorted. I can give one accounts guy from my team. Now all of them know the startup is, sir. So this is the problem they will face. We have got this format. We will do these filing for them, these compliances for them, company registration, this, that, whatever they require. We will do all that help for them. But essentially, they're not prepared to hit the market, if I had to say, because when you're hitting the market, then there's so many other challenges you see in your life. But all they have is passion, so which partially I like, but partially I dislike. That you should be really aware of how things are moving around.
Mm.
But sometimes I keep thinking, if they're aware of all these things, they are probably never going to come down to an investor like me. They would probably go to a much higher level guy.
Very well said.
Yeah.
And you did mention a little bit about an exit. At what stage do you look for an exit?
So, if I had to give a short answer, it's very simple. Whenever you get it,
Okay.
you don't have to be greedy because exit does not happen every now and then. But to elaborate it, whenever there is a bigger investor coming in, like a Series A or a Series B coming, that's the time you got to pursue your exit.
Mm.
Exit will not come automatically to you. You got to tell the founders, I've got my shares available for secondary sales, which are typically 15, 20, 25% discount to the current round. But I'm happy to sell them off because I've got 3x, 5x, 7x jump, which I believe is enough for me. It's not the time you be greedy and think about 18x or 20x, but more often than not, I've realized, and this is again coming from experience. So at some stage, I had a 8x or a 10x exit, and that was after 2 3 years of investment. Another 3 years waiting, 10 became only 12x, and that too also not real,
Okay.
because there were no
Yep.
takers for it. And
Mm.
sometimes the real exit happens at some stage. You saw a 10x, But now the real exit is happening at a 4x or a 5x, because the players like Reliance would buy it out, or a big players would buy it out. They buy it very cheap.
Correct.
Yeah. So essentially, when a bigger investor comes in, please offer your shares for secondary, and that's the best time you can actually get an exit. And a lot of angel investors kind of miss
Missed that. Okay.
this thing. Yeah.
That's amazing advice.
Yeah.
So one more question, for on angel investors. You mentioned that you've got a team of people who would automatically take charge of company banani hai, returns, etc. How involved should an angel investor get in the governance of a startup?
So I don't know if the governance of the startup. So if I'm the sole investor, I would sole or two or three friends if you're investing, I would actually be involved to a deeper extent, unless it's a crowd funded.
Mm,
So if it's a crowd funded thing, it's great. But now I've moved to the crowdfunding thing because a lot of things become easy. Due diligence and all these things are
mm,
done by these angel networks. But that said, individual investors, or sorry, individual startups keep approaching you, and more often than not, you just keep end up whatever I think. This is it. Now I'm not going to invest anymore. But it just excites you, and you were asking me about governance, but I'll tell you something more relevant to it. As a startup investor, I am actually learning much more than what they are learning out of me.
true.
They come up with these fantastic ideas, and they have got so many things that you don't realize that it's going to work. But after a while, you realize that's the future. So now you have to catch them early, catch them young. So now more often than not, I am actually having a constant 1 month, 2 month meeting with them,
Mm,
so that I am aware of what's happening in that industry, and that gives me an insight of where the next startup space is existing, and also if the competitor is there, and also if another startup of mine could be useful to this startup, or this startup could be useful to another startup of mine. So there is a lot of cross synergies.
energy. Yeah.
And if it is a startup of my domain like food,
Mm,
then I'm very much in touch with them, because I can tell them about a lot of compliances. Vice versa, I can tell them vice versa, they can tell me about a lot of markets that are opening up.
mm,
Because anyways, I'm not a B2C player. I don't care about my brand per se, but I am constantly interested in R&D that's happening across the globe.
mm.
So
Very good.
fortunately, it's like the analogy that I give is, you go for an MBA
Mm,
to a Harvard or a Stanford, and you pay a big check fees.
mm,
And this is exactly like that. If you're giving a check, please ensure that you take return out of it. And that's one advice I give to all these HNI investors also. If it is startup of your domain, or any which ways, if it can help you in your business, be involved, take all the advantages that you can take. And I think that's a key takeaway I've had in past 5 years.
amazing, amazing. So let's move on. You when I was reading about you, you also said that you worked with Tata Trust and the Gates Foundation. Tell me about the kind of work you've done there.
So Tata Trust, Bill Gates Foundations are another NGOs to our list, but fortunately they've got a very significant name in the country and across the globe
Mm,
actually. So the iron fortification project
mm,
that I was talking to you about was funded by IDRC Canada and Tata Trust.
okay.
So essentially, the government wanted iron to be added to salt,
Mm,
but they couldn't come up with a formulation. Then these guys had approached us. We were constantly doing R&D. Tata Trust funded this project, and we were able to develop a product which was eventually added to salt to make it double fortified. And similarly, Bill Gates Foundation. So Bill Gates is one guy who wants all the essential vitamin minerals to be fortified by salt. Also,
mhm,
salt is a medium, because this philosophy is, however rich or poor you are, whatever staple you are eating,
mm,
salt is something which you will never have less in your diet. So even if I'm a very poor guy, I will never compromise salt in my diet. If I'm very rich guy, I will not have extra salt in my diet.
true.
So that's his philosophy, that salt is a staple. So he wants 17 essential vitamin minerals to be fortified in salts, and we are working on it, and we've been able to reach eight. of those 17 as of now.
Wonderful.
So that's a project we've been working with them. Yeah.
Terrific. And you're also a public speaker. Tell me about the kind of public speaking you do.
So I'm not a public speaker per se, but these people invite me, as in all these young
Yeah.
colleges and MBA colleges or final year students or first year students. And I like to share my story and experiences. So over the period, I've realized people relate to you and your stories more than these examples across the globe because they
Absolutely.
feel you are one amongst them. I
Hmm.
was also a student. I had all my struggles. So that's how all this public speaking got into. And I've realized that if you share experiences, if you tell them, they relate to you, and then they can look at the bigger picture.
Correct.
So I'm not a public speaker per se, but I've started my YouTube channel because I believe that experience sharing is a great thing, and you learn from each other.
Absolutely right. So, Vivek, I'm going to move to the last segment of our conversation. There are a few questions for you personally. Um, my first question to you is that when you look back at life and you look at yourself as a successful entrepreneur, look at yourself as a successful investor, and you're doing so many other things, from where you stand today, what does success mean to Vivek?
What does success mean to you today? So success for me is a old age philosophy like Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett.
Hmm.
You're only successful if you're able to give back to society what you've actually done. These are
Correct.
more like Miss World kind of answers, but that's what I really believe in.
Mhm.
That because you've become what you are because of people around you. They've given you all the support and strength that you needed to make you to a level which you are today. So best ways giving back to the society is through sharing of experiences or through investments or helping someone who really needs help. So for me, someone who's really successful would be someone who's actually giving back to the society and is now actually thinking about what society needs and is giving back to the society. And I would actually add one thing. I'm actually a big fan of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. If you look at world's top 10 richest men for past 10, 15 years, there are only two names who've been constant: Bill Gates and Warren Buffett.
Absolutely.
And that the strong reason I believe is their philosophy of giving back to the society. These names have been constant forever.
Correct.
What they believe is giving back to the society, and that's where I draw my ideology from.
That's amazing. Amazing. And a follow up question to that is who or what inspires you other than Buffet and Gates?
So honestly, these guys inspire me only to one extent. The other people who inspire me are firstly or is firstly my dad,
Mhm.
who at this age, he's probably 68 now, is much more active than I am. And he's much more passionate about doing things. And then he's got his way of looking at things, and he's always a problem solver.
Mhm.
So he's one guy that I look up to all the time, and he's a problem solver all through for my life.
Mhm.
Second person who inspires me are my guru. So
Mhm.
I'm a hardcore Jain. I'm an ardent Jain follower.
Okay.
So all these Jain monks kind of inspire you. You've got everything in the earth, but these people, they don't need anything.
Mhm.
They don't even have anything of their own. I mean, all they want is they would come to your house, take some food, and go back, and they're busy in their study, and they're always happy. Whatever state of or whatever time you would go, they would walk barefoot in heated, heated weather, and in a cool weather, they have nothing to
Yeah.
protect them.
Mhm.
At the same time, even if you go and ask them, "How are you?" or "Ya aap kaise hai?" They would always be one smile on their face and saying, "We're very happy."
Mhm.
So that's something that inspires me. Come whatsoever, this ultimate happiness is ultimately going to be achieved when you're giving back, or you've kind of said that. So I'm a hardcore clan believer,
What a
and
great answer, and something that I've not heard from anyone else. And my last question to you, Vivek, now is on failure. And I actually have a new book that was published a month and a half ago on failure. I've had this hypothesis that Indian parents or South Asian parents don't teach children it's okay to fail. We are always taught first in class, head of the line, etc., etc., and that manifests itself in our behavior patterns. Yet we fail.
Of
So
course,
my
we do. Everyone does.
correct. So my question to you is, what are some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
So I've done big fiascos in my life.
I'm sure.
I'm not one of those who would say, my life has been perfect, perfect, perfect.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I've been supported by people all around me so that I've been able to come out of them. So
Wonderful.
talking about my failure, one big lesson that I learned is you just don't trust everyone on your face value. You know, we born in a Jain family have a very soft heart and we just trust everyone or whatever they say.
Hmm.
So one big failure is I've realized is I've trusted people beyond the extent that they start taking advantage of you.
Hmm.
So don't trust people easily. That said, do your due diligence, do your documentation check, and then start trusting. Trusting is a great habit. Secondly, if you've realized someone has done a mistake somewhere, or someone has actually lied to you once and now they're trying to cover up for those things, don't be gullible to fall into trap. Again, do all your due diligence. Just don't be easily gullible. So that's one very important learning that I've got is, I'm not saying don't trust people, but don't trust them on your face value. Do all your due diligence before
Correct.
you invest, because you've also earned your money in a hard way. My father wasn't a businessman. He
Hmm.
started his own business at a very late age, and eventually he's given us a lot of learnings,
Hmm.
which at some stage we try to ignore, but ultimately we have to fall back on him, because whatever failures we've got, he's the guy who's going to
Very true.
settle those things.
Very
And
true.
I'm very proud to still say that I live with my father. People, they think that doing their own or making something out of their own is a very big thing, but I'm very proud to say that I'm still dependent on my father, and I'm a I'm he's my problem solver to go to person, and whatever wrong even if I do, he's always supporting me and telling me these are the principles that you should always be careful next time you do any other step like that.
Fantastic. Vivek, thank you so much. I mean, it's been such a privilege speaking to you. I mean, I'm grateful you taught me about the three F's of business, of being an entrepreneur, family, friends, and fools. But what an amazing journey you've taken me down, sharing your philosophies, sharing your thoughts. And I'm so delighted about the amount of respect and gratitude you have for your dad, for your father. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you, Ashutosh, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'll be happy to help you in any of the endeavors that you have in future. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
having
much.
me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.